of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, as for doing anything wrong, all human beings do wrong things so long as they live in this world of ignorance. Because even if they wish to do right, they do not know what is the right thing to do until their consciousness is transformed. And for transformation, the first thing needed is complete sincerity. Not only to speak the truth, but to always be true to oneself and to the divine. With always our love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, Book 4, The Book of Birth and Quest, Canto 3, The Call to the Quest, page 421. Authors of earth's high change, to you it is given to cross the dangerous spaces of the soul and touch the mighty Mother stark awake and meet the Omnipotent in this house of flesh and make of life the million-bodied one. The earth you tread is a border screened from heaven. The life you lead conceals the light you are. Immortal powers sweep flaming past your doors. Far off upon your tops, the God chant sounds, while to exceed yourselves, thoughts trumpets call. Heard by a few, but fewer dare aspire. The nympholepts of the ecstasy and the blaze. An epic of hope and failure breaks earth's heart. Her force and will exceed her form and fate. A goddess in a net of inconscience caught, self-bound in the pastures of death, she dreams of life. Self-racked with the pains of hell, aspires to joy and builds to hope her altars of despair. Knows that one high step might enfranchise all, and suffering looks for greatness in her sons. But dim in human hearts, the ascending fire, the invisible grandeur sits unworshipped there. Man sees the highest in a limiting form, or looks upon a person, hears a name. He turns for little gains to ignorant powers, or kindles his altar lights to a demon face. He loves the ignorance fathering his pain. A spell is laid upon his glorious strengths. He has lost the inner voice that led his thoughts, and masking the oracular tripod seat, a spacious idol fills the marble shrine. our Lord Sri Aurobindo, taken from the collective works of our Lord Sri Aurobindo SABCL, book The Mother with Letters. Topic: Opening and Surrender to the Divine Mother. Subtopic: Openness to the Divine Mother. These words were written on 28th of October 1934. To be open is simply to be so turned to the Divine Mother that her force can work in you without anything refusing or obstructing her action. If the mind is shut up in its own ideas and refuses to allow her to bring in the light and the truth, if the vital clings to its desires and does not admit the true initiative and impulsions that the mother's power brings, if the physical is shut up in its desires, habits, and inertia, and does not allow the light and force to enter in it and work, then one is not open. It is not possible to be entirely open all at once in all the moments, but there must be a central opening in each part and a dominant aspiration or will in each part, not in the mind alone, to admit only the mother's workings. The rest will then progressively be done. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, to remain open to the Divine Mother is to remain always quiet and happy and confident, not restless, not grieving or despondent. To let her force work in you, guide you and give you knowledge, give you peace and ananda. If you cannot keep yourself open, then aspire constantly but quietly that you may be open. Question: some dissatisfactions come and affects the heart which is opening to the Divine Mother. For this our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, get rid of these dissatisfactions. They prevent the permanent psychic opening. Question: perhaps it is because the psychic is just opening that it comes under the influence of these dissatisfactions. For this our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, what the psychic always feels is what the mother does is for the best and accepts all with gladness. It is the vital part of the heart that is easily touched by the suggestions. Next subtopic: opening of the inner being. Question: does the inner being open to the Divine Mother by itself? For this our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the inner being does not open except by sadhana or by some psychic touch in life. Question: what is the part which feels like opening to the Divine Mother through writing, even when it is the same thing that goes on being repeated? For this our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, it may be the inner mental, it may be the psychic. Next subtopic: receiving the Divine Mother's grace. Question: is the Divine Mother's grace only general? For this our Lord says, both general and specific and special. How to receive what she grants in general is the next question. For this our Lord says, you have only to keep yourself open and whatever you need and can receive at the moment will come. Is it the Purusha who consents to the action of the Mother's grace in the whole being? For this our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, yes. When the Mother's grace comes down to the sadhak, is it by the consent of the Purusha? For this our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, what do you mean by the consent? The Mother's grace comes down by the Mother's will. The Purusha can accept or reject the grace. Conditions for progress. Question: if a sadhak, even after a long time, cannot fully open himself to the Divine Mother owing to obstacles in his nature, does it mean that he will not be accepted by the Divine Mother? For this our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, there is no meaning in such a question. Those who follow integral yoga here are accepted by the Divine Mother. For accepted means admitted into the yoga, admitted into the integral yoga, accepted as disciples. But the progress in the integral yoga and the siddhi in the yoga depends on the degree to which there is the opening. Next subtopic, progressive opening. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says openness is not always complete from the first. A part of the being opens, other parts of the consciousness remain still closed or half open only. One has to aspire till all is open. Even when the best and most powerful sadhaks, the full openings takes time, nor is there anyone who has been able to abandon everything at once without any struggle. There is no reason to feel, therefore, that if you call, you will not be heard. The mother knows the difficulties of human nature and will help you through. Persevere always, call always, and then after each difficulty there will be a progress, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Next subtopic, the inner and the higher opening. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says it is by the constant remembrance that the being is prepared for the full opening. By the opening of the heart, the mother's presence begins to be felt, and by the opening to her power above, the force of the higher consciousness comes down into the body and works there to change the whole nature. There is no method in integral yoga except to concentrate, preferably in the heart, and call the presence and power of the Divine Mother to take up the being and by the workings of her force transform the consciousness. One can concentrate also in the head or between the eyebrows, but for many this is too difficult opening. When the mind falls quiet and the concentration becomes strong and the aspiration intense, then there is a beginning of experience. The more the faith, the more rapid the result is likely to be. For the rest, one must not depend on one's own effort, but succeed in establishing a contact with the Divine Mother and a receptivity to the Mother's power and presence, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. The direct opening of the psychic center is easy only when the egocentricity is greatly diminished, and also if there is a strong bhakti for the Divine Mother. A spiritual humility and sense of submission and dependency is necessary. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says, yes, it is by quietening the mind that you will become able to call the Divine Mother and open to her. This soothing effect was a touch from the psychic, one of the touches that prepares the opening of the psychic with its gift of inner peace, love, and joy. The Mother's peace, the Divine Mother's peace is above you. By aspiration and quiet self-opening, it descends. When it takes hold of the vital and the body, then equanimity becomes easy and in the end automatic, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Next subtopic, openness to the Mother's force and avoidance of other forces. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says these words were said on 18th of September 1932. Our Lord says, keep yourself open to the Divine Mother's force and do not trust all forces. As you go on, if you keep straight, you will come to a time when the psychic becomes more predominantly active and the light from above prevails more purely and strongly, so that the chance of mental constructions and vital formations mixing with the true experience diminishes. As I have told you, these are not and cannot be the supramental forces. It is a work of preparation which is only making things ready for a future yoga siddhi. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, let the power of the Divine Mother work in you, but be careful to avoid any mixture or substitution in its place of either a magnified ego working or a force of ignorance presenting itself as truth. Aspire, especially for the elimination of all obscurity and unconsciousness in the nature. Next subtopic, loyalty and fidelity to the Divine Mother. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says, if an adverse force comes, one has not to accept and welcome its suggestions, but to turn to the Divine Mother and to refuse to turn away from her. Whether one can open or not, one has to be loyal and faithful. These two are the qualities for which one has to do integral yoga. These are very simple things which anyone who aspires for the truth ought to be able to accomplish. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says in the subtopic, the only way to succeed, and says, there is in a very fundamental part of your nature a strong formation of ego individuality, which has mixed in your spiritual aspiration a clinging element of pride and spiritual ambition. This formation has never consented to be broken up in order to give place to something more true and divine. Therefore, says our Lord, when the Divine Mother has put her force upon you, or when you yourself have pulled the force upon you, this in you has always prevented it from doing its work in its own way. It has begun itself building according to the ideas of the mind, some demand of the ego, trying to make its own creation in its own way, by its own strength, its own sadhana, own tapasya. There has never been any real surrender, any giving up of yourself freely and simply into the hands of the Divine Mother. And yet, that is the only way to succeed in supramental yoga. To be a yogi, a sannyasi, a tapasvi is not the object here. The object is transformation, and the transformation can only be done by a force infinitely greater than your own. It can only be done by being truly like a child in the hands of the Divine Mother, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Everyone who is turned to the Mother is doing integral yoga. It is a great mistake to suppose that one can do the Purna Yoga, that is, carry out and fulfill all sides of the yoga by one's own effort. No human being can do that. What one has to do is to put oneself in the Divine Mother's hands and open oneself to her by service, by bhakti, by aspiration. Then the Divine Mother, by her light and force, works in him so that the sadhana is done. It is a mistake also to have the ambition to become a big Purna Yogi or a supramental being and ask oneself how far I've got towards that. The right attitude is to be devoted and given to the Divine Mother and wish to be whatever she wants you to be. The rest is for the Mother to decide and do in you. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, if there is a refusal of the psychic new birth, refusal to become the child, the newborn child from the Divine Mother, owing to attachment to intellectual knowledge or mental ideas or some vital desire, then there will be failure in sadhana, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. And Meditations, May 20th, 1914. From the height of that summit, which is the identification with thy divine infinite love, thou didst turn my eyes to this complex body which has to serve thee as thy instrument. And thou didst tell me it is myself. Dost thou not see my light shining in it? And indeed, I saw thy divine love, clothed in intelligence, then in strength, constituting this body in its smallest cells and shining so brightly in it that it was nothing but a combination of millions of radiant sparks, all manifesting that they were thyself. And now all darkness has disappeared, and thou alone livest in different worlds, in different forms, with an identical life, immutable and eternal. This divine world of thy immutable domain of pure love and indivisible unity must be brought into close communion with the divine world of all the other domains, right down to the most material, in which thou art the center and very constitution of each atom. To establish a bond of perfect consciousness between all these successive divine worlds is the only way to live constantly, invariably in thee, accomplishing integrally the mission thou hast entrusted to the entire being in all states of consciousness and all its modes of activity. O sweet Master, thou hast caused a new wheel to be rent, another wheel of my ignorance, and without leaving my blissful place in thy eternal heart, I am at the same time in the imperceptible but infinite heart of each of the atoms constituting my body. Strengthen this complete and perfect consciousness. Make me enter into all the details of its perfection, and grant that without leaving thee for a single moment, I may constantly move up and down this infinite ladder according to the necessity of the work thou hast prescribed for me. I am thine, I am in thee, thyself in the plenitude of eternal bliss.